Eleanor Hayes's raw wrists bled as she hung from the post in Bandit territory. The crude sign above her head, warning, "White man, don't forgive," to any who might attempt rescue. The approaching rider with the jagged scar splitting his face was either her salvation or her executioner, and the look in his eyes told her nothing of which it would be. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Under the merciless sun of the Arizona territory, Nathaniel Hawke rode with steady purpose, the rhythmic creak of leather accompanying each step of his dappled stallion. His face, weathered and scarred from years in the unforgiving wilderness, betrayed nothing as he scanned the horizon. A long, jagged scar ran from his left temple to the corner of his mouth, a permanent reminder of the life he'd chosen as a bounty hunter. He had been tracking the Blackwell gang for 3 days, following a trail of destruction across the dusty plains. 6 men, wanted for murder, robbery, and worse. The bounty notices promised enough to keep him comfortable through winter, but Nathaniel had stopped hunting for money long ago. The afternoon heat shimmered across the landscape when he heard it, faint at first, like a whisper on the wind, a sound that didn't belong among the rustling sagebrush and distant coyote calls. He reined in his horse, head tilting slightly as he listened. There it came again, a whimper, sharp with pain and desperation. Nathaniel dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to a gnarled juniper. With practiced silence, he drew his Winchester rifle and moved forward, boots barely disturbing the rocky soil. He crested a small rise and then he saw her. A woman was bound to a wooden post at the center of a dried creek bed, her wrists shackled cruelly above her head. Her dress, once fine but now torn and dust-covered, fluttered weakly in the hot breeze. Long dark hair hung limp across her face, but he could see her chest rising with shallow, labored breaths. Beside the post, someone had driven a crude wooden sign into the ground. The words were scrawled in what looked like dried blood. "Property of the Blackwell gang. Touch her and die." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He'd seen the work of men like this before, leaving bait to lure in would-be rescuers, setting traps for the compassionate. His eyes swept the surrounding ridges, searching for movement, for the glint of a rifle barrel in the sun. The terrain offered dozens of hiding places for an ambush. "Damn it all," he muttered, knowing he couldn't leave her there. He approached cautiously, rifle ready, eyes never staying in one place too long. As he drew closer, the woman stirred, raising her head with visible effort. Her face was bruised, a split lip crusted with blood, but her eyes, a startling blue against her dirt-streaked skin, widened with fear at his approach. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "It's a trap." Nathaniel nodded once. "I figured as much. They'll be back at sunset," she continued urgently. "They always come back at sunset." The sun hung low on the horizon now, painting the cliffs in fierce oranges and reds. "Not much time. What's your name?" he asked, checking the shackles. They were solid iron, locked with a heavy padlock. "Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Hayes." "Well, Miss Hayes, I'm Nathaniel Hawke, and we're about to disappoint some very dangerous men." He pulled a set of lockpicks from his vest pocket and began working on the padlock, keeping his rifle within reach. The metal was hot enough to burn, having baked in the sun all day. "Why would you risk this?" she asked, disbelief in her parched voice. "You don't know me." Nathaniel's hands never paused in their work. "Don't need to." The lock clicked open, and he caught her as she collapsed forward, her legs too weak to support her weight. She was lighter than he expected, dehydrated from hours in the sun. He lowered her gently to the ground, uncorked his canteen, and held it to her lips. "Small sips," he instructed. "And too much too fast will make you sick." Eleanor obeyed, though he could see the desperate thirst in her eyes. When she'd had enough, he dampened his bandana and wiped the dust and blood from her face with surprising gentleness for hands so calloused. "My father is Thomas Hayes," she said suddenly. "Hayes Shipping Company in San Francisco. He'll reward you handsomely for—" "I don't want your father's money." Nathaniel cut her off. "Can you stand?" She nodded, though uncertainty flashed across her face. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. The iron shackles still hung from her wrists. He'd need better tools to remove those completely. "How long have they had you?" he asked, scanning the horizon again. The sun was touching the western mountains now, shadows stretching like fingers across the land. "In 6 days," she answered, her voice stronger after the water. "They ambushed our stagecoach. The others, they killed them all." Nathaniel nodded grimly. "The Blackwells don't leave witnesses, except me," she said bitterly. "Their leader, Clayton, he said I was too pretty to waste." She shuddered at the memory. A distant sound caught Nathaniel's attention. Hoofbeats, still far off but approaching. He turned toward his horse, urgency in his movements. "We need to move now." He helped her onto his stallion, then swung up behind her. She was trembling, whether from weakness or fear. He couldn't tell, probably both. "Where are we going?" she asked, as he turned the horse toward the gathering darkness of the east. "There's an old mining camp about 15 miles from here. A friend lives there. We'll be safe for the night." And then Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. The smart thing would be to take her to the nearest town with a sheriff, collect whatever reward her father might offer, and be on his way. But the Blackwells had connections in most frontier towns, corrupted lawmen, paid informants. They wouldn't stop hunting her, or anyone who helped her. "Then we figure out how to keep you alive," he finally said. They rode hard as darkness fell, Eleanor's body tense against his chest. The hoofbeats behind them grew louder, then multiplied. The Blackwells had discovered their bait, missing. As they crested a ridge, Nathaniel looked back. 6 riders, silhouetted against the crimson sunset, gaining ground with every passing minute. Clayton Blackwell would be at the lead, the man whose brother Nathaniel had brought to justice 3 years ago. The man who'd given him the scar that carved his face in two. Eleanor followed his gaze and gasped. "They're coming!" "Yes," he said grimly, urging his horse faster. "And they won't stop until they find us." She turned to look at him, moonlight illuminating the determination in her eyes. "Why risk your life for a stranger, Mr. Hawke?" The question hung between them as they raced through the gathering darkness. Nathaniel's scar seemed to burn as memories flooded back. Another woman, another rescue, one that had ended in blood and fire. "Because no one else will," he said finally, his voice barely audible above the pounding hooves beneath them. "And because some debts can never be repaid." As they descended into a narrow canyon, the sounds of pursuit faded temporarily, but Nathaniel knew better than to hope they'd lost them. The Blackwells knew this territory too well. "I'm going to get you home, Miss Hayes," he promised, "whatever it takes." She didn't respond, but her hands tightened on his arm, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible odds facing them. Behind them, Clayton Blackwell and his men continued their relentless pursuit, their hatred driving them forward like demons in the night. And so they rode, a scarred hunter and his unexpected charge, fleeing into darkness with danger at their heels, toward an uncertain dawn that promised either salvation or death. The old mining camp appeared like a ghost in the moonlight, weathered wooden structures half reclaimed by the earth, abandoned equipment scattered like bones across the barren ground. Only one cabin showed signs of life, a faint orange glow behind burlap-covered windows and thin smoke rising from a crooked chimney. Nathaniel dismounted first, then gently helped Eleanor down. Her legs buckled beneath her, and he caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist. The iron shackles still hanging from her wrists clinked softly in the night air. "Just a little further," he encouraged, leading her toward the lit cabin. Before they reached the door, it swung open. A figure stood silhouetted against the warm light, a man, tall and lean, with a shotgun held loosely in gnarled hands. "That you, Nate?" The voice was deep, rough with age and whiskey. "It's me, Virgil," Nathaniel answered. "I've brought trouble," the old man grunted. "You always do." His eyes, sharp despite his years, took in Eleanor's condition and the shackles at her wrists. Without another word, he stepped aside, ushering them in. The cabin's interior was sparse but orderly, a far cry from what its dilapidated exterior suggested. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls lined with bookshelves. A table held maps and what looked like scientific instruments. In one corner, a makeshift workshop was set up with tools, metal parts, and half-finished inventions. "Sit her there," Virgil directed, pointing to a chair near the fire. "She looks about ready to collapse." Nathaniel guided Eleanor to the seat. Her face was pale in the firelight, exhaustion etched in every line. Virgil disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a blanket, which he draped around her shoulders. "The Blackwells?" Virgil asked, setting his shotgun against the wall. Nathaniel nodded. They're not far behind. Maybe an hour. Damn! The old man ran a hand through his white beard. Been waiting for Clayton to come knocking ever since you brought in his brother. Eleanor looked up sharply. You're the one who captured Michael Blackwell? The papers said he killed 12 men before they hanged him. 13, Nathaniel corrected quietly. The girl they found in the canyon didn't make the papers. A silence fell over the room, broken only by the pop and hiss of burning wood in the hearth. Virgil busied himself at a cabinet, pulling out a metal box filled with tools. Let's get those shackles off, he said, approaching Eleanor. Poor craftsmanship. Blackwell's never could do anything right except kill. As Virgil worked on the locks, Nathaniel moved to the window, peering through a gap in the burlap. The moonlit landscape was still and empty, but he knew that wouldn't last. The Blackwells were coming, drawn by vengeance and whatever twisted desire Clayton had for Eleanor. You said they had you for 6 days, Nathaniel said, without turning from the window. Why keep you alive that long? Eleanor flinched, and Virgil shot Nathaniel a reproachful look, but she answered, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. Clayton wants my father's shipping routes, the ones that carry gold from the California mines. He thinks I know them. The first shackle fell away from her wrist with a dull clank. I don't. My father never shared business details with me. But Clayton doesn't believe that, Nathaniel guessed. She shook her head. He's convinced I'm lying. Each day her voice faltered. Each day was worse than the one before. The second shackle came free. Virgil gently took her wrists, examining the raw, bloody skin beneath. Without a word, he moved to a shelf and returned with a jar of salve. And your father, Nathaniel continued, still watching the darkness outside. He's a powerful man. Yes, one of the wealthiest in San Francisco, and he'd pay anything to get you back. It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. Yes, he would. Nathaniel turned from the window finally, his scarred face impassive. Then that's our advantage. Clayton won't kill you. You're worth more alive. Me, on the other hand, he touched the scar on his face absently. He'll want to take his time with me. You know each other, Eleanor said, understanding dawning in her eyes. We have history, Nathaniel admitted. His brother didn't come in easy. Virgil finished applying the salve and wrapped clean bandages around Eleanor's wrist. History is a polite way of putting it. Clayton put that scar on Nate's face with a red-hot knife. Would have killed him if I hadn't shown up. Eleanor's eyes widened. And still you came for me, knowing it was them. Before Nathaniel could answer, Virgil's head snapped up. Riders coming, moving slow, trying to be quiet. Nathaniel moved swiftly to the center of the room, pulling up a trapdoor hidden beneath a faded rug. Down here, both of you. Like hell, Virgil growled, reaching for his shotgun. This is my home, and they'll burn it to the ground with you inside if you stay, Nathaniel shot back. I need you to protect her, Virgil. Get her to San Francisco if I don't make it. The old man hesitated, then nodded grimly. He gathered a few items quickly, a revolver, ammunition, a small bag that clinked with metal components, and moved toward the trapdoor. Eleanor stood her ground. I won't leave you to face them alone, not after you risked everything to save me. Nathaniel stepped closer to her, his voice low but firm. This isn't your fight, Miss Hayes. They made it mine when they killed everyone on that stagecoach. Her blue eyes flashed with a determination that matched his own. I may not be able to shoot, but I won't hide while you die for me. For a moment, they stood locked in silent battle of wills. Then, surprisingly, Nathaniel's scarred face softened into something almost like respect. Virgil, he said without breaking eye contact with Eleanor, give her the derringer. The old man raised an eyebrow, but pulled a small, two-shot pistol from a drawer and handed it to Eleanor. Simple to use, he explained quickly. Point and pull the trigger. Only 2 shots, so make them count. She took the weapon, her hands steadier now, determination replacing fear in her bearing. I will, Nathaniel turned to Virgil. Take the tunnel. It leads to the old shaft entrance near the creek bed. Wait for us there. If we're not out by dawn... I know, the old man interrupted. Get the girl to her father. He clasped Nathaniel's shoulder briefly. Try not to die, you stubborn fool. With that, he disappeared down the trapdoor. Nathaniel closed it after him, replacing the rug carefully. If it goes badly, he told Eleanor, That's your escape route? Virgil will get you home. She nodded, the little pistol clutched in her hand. It won't go badly. A grim smile touched his lips. I admire your optimism, Miss Hayes. Nathaniel moved quickly around the cabin, extinguishing all but one lamp, positioning himself behind a heavy oak table that he turned on its side for cover. Eleanor took position in the shadows near the fireplace, the derringer hidden in the folds of her tattered dress. Outside, the sound of approaching horses had stopped. Silence settled over the cabin like a shroud. Nathaniel checked his Winchester, then his revolver, ensuring both were fully loaded. They'll try to talk first, he whispered to Eleanor. Clayton likes to hear himself speak, likes to see fear in his victims, eyes before he kills them. I'm not afraid, she whispered back, though the slight quiver in her voice betrayed her. Good, he said. Fear makes you hesitate. We can't afford that tonight, a voice called from outside, smooth as silk and cold as a rattlesnake's gaze. Nathaniel Hawke. I know you're in there, old friend. Come out and let's talk like civilized men. Nathaniel didn't respond, just exchanged a look with Eleanor that said everything. It's beginning. I just want the girl, Hawke, the voice continued. You give her to me, and I might let you walk away with just a few new scars to match the one you already have. The cabin fell silent again. Outside, men moved into position, surrounding them completely. Through a crack in the wall, Nathaniel counted 6 shadows against the moonlit landscape. All the Blackwell brothers, come to collect their prize and their revenge. I'm going to count to 10, Hawke, Clayton called. Then we're coming in, and I promise you won't like how we do it. Nathaniel raised his rifle, sighting through a gap in the boarded window. Eleanor pressed herself deeper into the shadows, the small pistol clutched in white-knuckled hands. 1. Nathaniel drew a deep breath, steadying his aim. 2. Eleanor whispered something. A prayer, perhaps. Or a promise. 3. The night held its breath, waiting for blood. 4. Nathaniel's finger rested lightly on the trigger, eyes fixed on the shadowy figure he knew to be Clayton Blackwell. One clean shot could end it all, but the others would storm the cabin immediately. His chances against 5 remaining Blackwells weren't good, especially with Eleanor to protect. 5. Last time I saw Clayton, Nathaniel whispered to Eleanor without taking his eyes from the window, he promised to peel the skin from my face. Man takes his promises seriously. 6. Eleanor's voice came from the darkness, soft but steady. My father says a person's true character is revealed when they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. 7. A faint smile touched Nathaniel's lips. Your father sounds like a wise man. 8. He is, she replied, and generous. He'll make sure you never want for anything after this. 9. Nathaniel shifted his aim slightly, focusing on the oil lamp hanging from a post near the Blackwell's horses. I don't do this for rewards, Miss Hayes. 10. The Winchester's report shattered the night. Outside, the oil lamp exploded in a shower of glass and flame. The horses reared and screamed, several breaking free of their tethers as fire spread to the dry brush nearby. Shouts of confusion and rage erupted from the Blackwells. Go! Nathaniel hissed, abandoning his position and rushing to Eleanor's side. The back door! Now! He grabbed her arm, pulling her through the darkness toward the rear of the cabin. Behind them, the front door splintered as someone kicked it in. Gunfire erupted, bullets tearing through the walls and embedding themselves in the logs around them. They burst through the back door into the cool night air. The commotion at the front of the cabin gave them a moment's advantage. Nathaniel led Eleanor toward a cluster of boulders 20 yards from the cabin, keeping low and moving fast. Get down and stay down, he ordered, positioning her behind the largest rock. "Man, I'm going to circle back and even the odds." Before she could protest, he was gone, melting into the shadows with the silent grace of a predator. Eleanor clutched the derringer to her chest, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watched the chaos unfold. The fire had spread, illuminating the night with an orange glow. 2 of the Blackwells were trying to control the panicking horses, while the others had entered the cabin. Suddenly, gunfire erupted again, but this time from outside the cabin near the woodpile. One of the men by the horses jerked backward, clutching his chest before collapsing to the ground. The other spun, firing wildly into the darkness, only to be cut down by another precisely placed shot Inside the cabin, someone shouted in alarm. 3 figures burst through the front door, weapons drawn. Clayton Blackwell's voice rose above the crackling flames. "Spread out! Find them!" From her hiding place, Eleanor could see the 3 remaining brothers separating, moving cautiously into the surrounding terrain. Clayton, distinguishable by his long coat and wide-brimmed hat, headed directly toward the boulders where she hid. Her fingers tightened around the derringer. 20 feet, 15. Clayton's face came into view, handsome in a cruel way, his eyes reflecting the distant flames. 10 feet, a shadow detached itself from the darkness behind Clayton. Nathaniel, moving with deadly intent, knife in hand. But before he could strike, a shout came from near the cabin. "Clayton, behind you!" Clayton whirled, firing his revolver in one fluid motion. Nathaniel dove to the side, the bullet grazing his shoulder. He rolled to his feet, knife gleaming in the firelight, facing Clayton across a small clearing between the rocks. "There you are," Clayton said, his voice almost gentle. "I've been dreaming of this moment for 3 years, Hawk." "Funny," Nathaniel replied, circling slowly. "I hardly think of you at all." Clayton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You took my brother from me. Your brother was a murderer and a rapist. The world's better without him. And you're what? A righteous man?" Clayton laughed, cold and sharp. "Look at yourself, Hawk. You're just like us, a killer. The only difference is you pretend your hands aren't bloody." From her hiding place, Eleanor could see Nathaniel's face harden, the scar livid against his skin in the firelight. Clayton was maneuvering him away from the boulders, away from her. "The girl doesn't have what you want," Nathaniel said, still circling. "You're wasting your time." "Oh? I think she does," Clayton replied. "And even if she doesn't, her father will pay handsomely to get her back." His eyes gleamed. "After I finished with her, of course." Nathaniel lunged suddenly, knife slashing. Clayton jumped back, firing. The bullet missed, and Nathaniel pressed forward, driving Clayton toward the burning brush. They grappled briefly before separating, both breathing hard. "You've gotten slow," Clayton taunted, blood trickling from a shallow cut on his cheek. "Still fast enough for you," Nathaniel returned. A movement to the left caught Eleanor's attention. One of the other Blackwells was creeping around the boulders, rifle raised, trying to get a clear shot at Nathaniel. Without thinking, she stepped from her hiding place and fired the derringer. The small pistol barked, the recoil stronger than she expected. The Blackwell staggered, clutching his arm, but didn't fall. He swung his rifle toward her. Nathaniel shouted her name, momentarily distracted. Clayton seized the opportunity, charging forward and tackling him to the ground. The knife went flying as they rolled in the dirt, exchanging vicious blows. The wounded Blackwell advanced on Eleanor, his face twisted with rage. She backed away, the empty derringer useless in her hand. Her second shot gone wide in her panic. "You'll pay for that, bitch!" he snarled, raising his rifle. A deafening blast cut through the night. The Blackwell's chest erupted in a spray of red, and he toppled forward. Behind him stood Virgil, shotgun smoking in his hands. "Thought I told you to wait at the creek," Nathaniel grunted, still wrestling with Clayton on the ground. "And miss all the fun?" Virgil replied, already turning to locate the last Blackwell. Eleanor ran to retrieve Nathaniel's fallen knife. Clayton had gained the upper hand, straddling Nathaniel's chest with his hands around his throat. Nathaniel bucked and thrashed, trying to dislodge him, his face reddening as Clayton's grip tightened. "I'm going to watch the light leave your eyes," Clayton hissed, leaning closer. "Oh, just like you did to my brother." Eleanor approached from behind, knife trembling in her hand. She had never harmed another person in her life. The thought of plunging the blade into human flesh made her stomach turn. But Nathaniel was dying before her eyes, his struggles weakening. She raised the knife, steeling herself for what she must do when a gunshot cracked through the air. Clayton jerked, a look of surprise crossing his face. A red stain blossomed on his chest. Virgil stood several yards away, revolver in hand. "Nobody touches my friends," the old man said simply. Clayton slumped sideways, his grip on Nathaniel's throat finally broken. Nathaniel rolled away, gasping for air, as Clayton lay on his back, blood bubbling from his lips with each labored breath. "You should have killed me when you had the chance, Hawker," Clayton wheezed, his eyes already growing distant. Some debts can only be paid in blood. Eleanor knelt beside Nathaniel, helping him sit up as he massaged his bruised throat. Are you all right? He nodded, unable to speak yet. His eyes went to the knife in her hand, then to Clayton's dying form, understanding dawning in his gaze. She had been ready to kill for him. The last Blackwell emerged from the shadows near the burning cabin, hands raised in surrender. Virgil kept him covered, while Eleanor helped Nathaniel to his feet. It's over, she said softly, looking around at the carnage surrounding them. 5 men dead, a cabin in flames, all because of her. Nathaniel followed her gaze, reading the guilt in her expression. No, he rasped, his voice rough from Clayton's stranglehold. It was over the moment they decided to take you. As if to punctuate his words, Clayton Blackwell drew his final breath, his sightless eyes staring up at the star-filled sky. We need to move, Virgil said, approaching with the surviving Blackwell at gunpoint. Fire's getting bigger, might attract attention. Nathaniel nodded, retrieving his rifle and checking Clayton's body for anything useful. From inside the dead man's coat, he pulled a folded piece of paper. What is it? Eleanor asked, watching him scan the contents. A telegram, he replied, brow furrowing. From someone named Harrington in San Francisco. He looked up at her. Do you know him? Eleanor's face paled. Edward Harrington. He's my father's business partner. Nathaniel handed her the telegram. It was brief and damning. Clayton, stop girl knows nothing. Stop eliminate her once you have documents. Stop double payment upon confirmation. Stop Harrington. Eleanor read it twice, her hands beginning to shake. I don't understand. Edward is like an uncle to me. He wouldn't. Seems like he would, Virgil said grimly, peering over her shoulder at the message. This changes things, Nathaniel said, taking the telegram back and tucking it inside his vest. You can't go home. Not yet. But my father could be in danger too, Nathaniel finished for her. If Harrington wants you dead, there's more to this than shipping routes. The surviving Blackwell chuckled darkly. You folks are in deeper than you know. Harrington's got half the territorial officials in his pocket, judges, lawmen. You won't live long enough to see San Francisco. Virgil silenced him with a sharp jab from his shotgun. What do we do with this one? Nathaniel considered the man for a moment. Tie him up? Leave him for the sheriff in Silver Creek? We'll be long gone by the time he gets free. And then, Eleanor asked, the weight of the telegram's revelation heavy in her voice. Then we find out why your father's partner wants you dead, Nathaniel said, his scarred face resolute in the dying firelight, and we make sure he fails. Dawn broke over the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in soft gold and pink. Nathaniel, Eleanor, and Virgil had ridden through the remainder of the night, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the burning remains of the mining camp. They traveled in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the rhythm of the horses' hooves marking time like a mournful drumbeat. Eleanor rode double with Nathaniel, her back pressed against his chest, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. Exhaustion had finally claimed her in the early morning hours, and she drifted in and out of consciousness, her head occasionally lolling back against his shoulder. Each time, Nathaniel would adjust his hold slightly, ensuring she wouldn't fall. Virgil led the way on a dun mare, the lone surviving Blackwell brother tied and gagged across a third horse that trailed behind them. The outlaw had stopped struggling hours ago, resigned to his fate. As the sun climbed higher, they descended into a narrow valley where a small creek wound through stands of cottonwood trees. Virgil raised a hand, signaling a stop. We'll rest here, he announced, dismounting stiffly. Horses need water. So do we. Nathaniel nodded, gently shaking Eleanor awake. Miss Hayes, we're stopping for a while. She stirred, momentarily disoriented. Then awareness returned. Along with the memory of all that had transpired, she straightened, wincing at the stiffness in her body. How long was I asleep? She asked, her voice hoarse. A couple hours, Nathaniel replied, helping her down from the horse. Her legs nearly buckled as they touched the ground, and he steadied her with a hand at her elbow. You needed it. While Virgil secured their prisoner to a tree, Nathaniel led the horses to the creek. Eleanor followed, kneeling at the water's edge to splash her face and drink from cupped hands. The cold water revived her somewhat, washing away the grime of captivity and battle. She caught her reflection in the still pool beneath an overhanging bank. A stranger stared back at her, hollow-eyed and gaunt, hair tangled and matted with dirt and blood. "You look like hell," Virgil commented, approaching with a small bundle. "But considering what you've been through, that's a compliment." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal strips of jerky, hardtack, and a handful of dried berries. "Eat. Not fancy, but it'll keep you going." Eleanor accepted the food gratefully. As she ate, Virgil pulled a battered tin cup from his saddlebag, filled it with water, and carried it to their prisoner. The man drank greedily when Virgil removed his gag. "What's your name, boy?" Virgil asked, his tone surprisingly conversational. The outlaw eyed him warily. Jesse Blackwell. "You the youngest?" A nod. "Clayton was oldest. Then Michael. Then the twins. Luke and Matthew, then Samuel, then me, and now it's just you," Virgil observed. "How old are you, Jesse?" 19. The young man's voice cracked slightly. Despite everything, Eleanor felt a flicker of pity. He was barely more than a boy. Nathaniel returned from tending the horses, his expression hardening when he saw Virgil talking to the prisoner. "Don't get friendly, Virgil. He'd have killed us all without blinking. Just gathering information." Virgil replied mildly. "Something doesn't add up about this whole business." Nathaniel knelt beside Eleanor, checking her bandaged wrists with gentle fingers. "How are they feeling?" "Better," she said, though the raw flesh still burned beneath the bandages. "Thank you," he nodded, then pulled the telegram from his vest. "We need to talk about this." "About Harrington." Eleanor took a deep breath, setting aside her half-eaten food. "Edward Harrington has been my father's partner for 15 years. He's been to every Christmas dinner, every birthday celebration. He taught me to ride when I was 7. Her voice faltered. "I can't believe he would want me dead." "Believe it," Jesse Blackwell called from his tree. And 9, Harrington paid Clayton $5,000 up front to get those shipping documents and kill you. Another $5,000 on completion. Nathaniel's head snapped up. "What? Shipping documents?" Jesse smirked. "The ones hidden in her father's watch." Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. "My locket. Clayton took it the first day." Her eyes widened with realization. "It was my mother's. Father had it modified after she died. He gave it to me before I left San Francisco, told me to keep it safe." "What was in it?" Nathaniel pressed. "I don't know," she admitted. "It was sealed. He said it contained something precious, something that would secure our family's future." Virgil and Nathaniel exchanged glances. "Clayton must have had it on him," Virgil said. "Did you check his body?" Nathaniel shook his head. "There wasn't time. And I didn't know what I was looking for. So it's gone," Eleanor said, despair creeping into her voice. "Burned with the cabin, or lost in the chaos." "Maybe not," Nathaniel said thoughtfully. "Harrington's telegram said to eliminate you after they had the documents. If Clayton had already found them, why keep you alive?" Hope flickered in Eleanor's eyes. "You think he never found them?" "I think," Nathaniel said slowly, "that whatever was hidden in that locket wasn't obvious. Clayton might have opened it and not recognized what he had." Jesse laughed from his place by the tree. "You're right about that. Clayton was fit to be tied. Said there was nothing but a folded piece of paper with numbers and letters. No map, no contract, nothing worth killing for." Eleanor frowned. "A code, perhaps. Father always was careful with sensitive information, which means," Nathaniel concluded, "the locket might still be valuable, and Clayton might have kept it, hoping to figure it out. Or sold it," Virgil suggested. "Something that fine would fetch a good price in the right place." Nathaniel stood. "Decision made. We need to get to Silver Creek, not just to drop off our friend here, but to ask some questions. If Clayton tried to sell that locket, someone in town will remember." "Silver Creek is Harrington territory," Jesse warned, a sly grin spreading across his face. "He owns the bank. The sheriff answers to him. You'll be walking into a trap." "Then we don't walk in announcing ourselves," Nathaniel replied evenly. "Virgil, you take our prisoner to the sheriff. Make up a story about finding him wounded on the trail. Eleanor and I will find different accommodations." "The McClanahan place," Virgil suggested. "Sarah's still there, running it since her husband died. She's no friend to Harrington or his cronies." Eleanor struggled to her feet. "I should go with you, Virgil. The sheriff might recognize me." Nathaniel shook his head firmly. "Too risky. If Harrington has men in Silver Creek, they'll be watching for you." "He's right," Virgil agreed. "Best you stay hidden while we figure things out." Eleanor wanted to argue but knew they were right. She was a liability in town, too recognizable with her fine features and city mannerisms, even beneath the dirt and dishevelment. "What about him?" she asked, nodding toward Jesse. "He'll tell the sheriff everything the moment you leave," Virgil chuckled. "Not if I tell the sheriff he's wanted for stage robbery in Tucson. By the time they sort it out, we'll be long gone." They rested for another hour, then mounted up. Virgil took the lead with Jesse's horse in tow, while Nathaniel and Eleanor followed at a distance. They would separate before reaching Silver Creek, taking different approaches to avoid drawing attention. As they rode, Eleanor found herself studying Nathaniel's profile, the harsh lines of his scar stark against his skin in the midday sun. So much about him remained a mystery: his past, his motivations, the demons that drove him to risk his life for a stranger. "Why do you do this?" she asked quietly. "Hunt men like the Blackwells." Nathaniel was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, meant only for her. 8 years ago, I had a wife, Margaret, and a daughter, Sarah. His words came slowly, as if each one had to be excavated from someplace deep and painful. "We had a small ranch north of here, nothing fancy, but it was ours." Eleanor held her breath, sensing the weight of what was to come. Men came. 7 of them, ex-soldiers turned outlaws. They wanted horses, supplies, money we didn't have. His jaw tightened. "I was in the south pasture when I heard the shots. By the time I got back," his voice trailed off. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor whispered. "I tracked them for 3 months," Nathaniel continued, his voice flat now, emotionless. "Found them one by one. When it was done, I had nowhere to go back to. Nothing left except the skill to hunt bad men, and that's what you've done ever since," she concluded softly. He nodded once. "There's always another Clayton Blackwell, another gang terrorizing innocent people, but it doesn't bring them back," Eleanor said gently. "Your family?" "No." His eyes met hers briefly. "But maybe it stops someone else from losing theirs." The simple honesty of his words struck Eleanor deeply. Behind the scarred exterior and deadly efficiency was a man driven not by vengeance, but by the desperate hope that his suffering might prevent others from experiencing the same fate. Before she could respond, Virgil reined in his horse, gesturing for them to stop. He pointed to a plume of dust on the horizon. Riders, moving fast in their direction. "Trouble," Nathaniel muttered, immediately guiding their horse off the trail and toward a stand of junipers. "Could be a posse from Silver Creek." "Looking for us?" Eleanor asked, heart quickening. "Maybe. News travels fast out here." He dismounted quickly, helping her down. "Stay low and follow me." From the cover of the trees, they watched as Virgil continued on the trail, maintaining a casual pace as if he had nothing to hide. The approaching riders, 6 men, heavily armed, slowed as they neared him. "That's Harrington's foreman," Eleanor whispered, recognizing the lead rider. "Marcus Bell. He oversees shipment security for the company." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "Then these aren't local lawmen. They're Harrington's private force." They couldn't hear the conversation between Virgil and the riders, but they saw Jesse Blackwell struggling against his bonds, trying to call out. One of the men struck him, silencing him effectively. After what seemed an eternity, the riders moved on, continuing down the trail without Virgil. The old man waited until they were out of sight, then veered off the path toward the junipers. "They're hunting you," he announced grimly as he reached them. "Harrington's put out word that you kidnapped Miss Hayes and murdered the men sent to rescue her. $500 for information, 1,000 for capture." Eleanor gasped. "That's absurd. They were the ones who—" "It doesn't matter," Nathaniel cut in. "It's your word against Harrington's. And out here, money buys the truth." He turned to Virgil. "Silver Creek is out. They'll be watching every approach. So we change course," Virgil said pragmatically. "Where to?" Nathaniel considered for a moment, his scarred face grave. "We need to get to San Francisco, warn Eleanor's father. But first, we need proof of Harrington's betrayal." "The locket," Eleanor said firmly. "We have to find it. And for that," Nathaniel concluded, We need to know where Clayton Blackwell would sell something valuable. Somewhere not connected to Harrington? A slow smile spread across Virgil's weathered face. I might know just the place. He glanced at Eleanor, then back to Nathaniel. But you're not going to like it. The Red Garter Saloon stood at the edge of Copper Canyon, a ramshackle two-story building that leaned slightly to the left as if perpetually drunk. Music and raucous laughter spilled from its open doors into the dusty street. Oil lamps cast a golden glow on painted women who lounged on the balcony above, calling to passers-by with promises of companionship. Nathaniel scowled at the establishment from the shadows of an alley across the street. This is your idea of somewhere not connected to Harrington, Virgil shrugged, unrepentant. Madame Rosalie runs this place her way, doesn't answer to banks, lawmen, or businessmen. If Clayton Blackwell had something valuable to sell, she'd be the one to buy it, no questions asked. It's also the first place Harrington's men will look for us, Nathaniel countered. Which is why they won't expect us to walk right through the front door, Virgil replied with a wink. Eleanor, nearly unrecognizable in the clothes they'd acquired from Sarah McClanahan's homestead, shifted uncomfortably beside them. Gone was the tattered dress she'd worn since her captivity, replaced by men's trousers, a loose shirt, and a worn leather vest. Her hair was tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her face smudged with dirt to disguise her fine features. I still don't understand why I need to pretend to be a boy, she whispered. Because, Nathaniel explained patiently, Harrington's men are looking for a woman traveling with two men, not two men traveling with a young stable hand. The disguise had been Virgil's idea. With her slender build and height, Eleanor could pass for a youth of 15 or 16, at a distance and in the right clothes. Up close, the illusion wouldn't hold, but it might buy them enough time to enter the saloon without drawing immediate attention. And remember, Nathaniel cautioned, stay close, speak as little as possible, and let Virgil and me do the talking. Eleanor nodded, squaring her shoulders and adopting a slight slouch that Virgil had taught her. Boys your age ain't learned to stand properly yet, he'd explained. They crossed the street, Nathaniel leading with his usual purposeful stride, Virgil following with Jesse Blackwell's horse in tow. They had kept the outlaw's mount after leaving him tied near a watering hole where a local rancher would find him. Eleanor walked behind them, mimicking the loose-limbed gait Virgil had demonstrated. The saloon fell quieter as they entered, patrons giving the newcomers the customary once-over before returning to their drinks and conversations. The interior was surprisingly clean, with polished brass fixtures and red velvet curtains framing the windows. A long mahogany bar ran the length of one wall, behind which a portly bartender polished glasses with a white cloth. Virgil approached the bar, ordering whiskey for himself and Nathaniel, and a sarsaparilla for their young companion. The bartender raised an eyebrow, but asked no questions as he poured the drinks. We're looking for Madame Rosalie, Virgil said casually, sliding coins across the bar. The bartender's eyes narrowed. She expecting you? No, Virgil admitted, but she'll want to see us. We have a business proposition that might interest her. The bartender studied them for a moment, then nodded toward a beaded curtain at the back of the saloon. Through there, up the stairs, second door on the right, and mind your manners, she doesn't tolerate foolishness. Virgil tipped his hat in thanks, and they made their way across the crowded room. Eleanor kept her head down, conscious of the curious glances directed their way. Nathaniel moved with fluid awareness, his scarred face impassive, but his eyes constantly scanning for threats. Beyond the beaded curtain, a narrow staircase led to the second floor. As they climbed, the music from the saloon faded, replaced by the soft strains of a piano being played somewhere above. The upper hallway was dimly lit and lined with doors, most closed, though muffled sounds emanated from behind several. Virgil knocked twice on the second door on the right. A moment passed before a woman's voice, rich and deep, called, "Enter." Madame Rosalie was not what Eleanor had expected. Instead of the painted, bejeweled madam of her imagination, she found a slender woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed in a high-necked gown of deep purple. Her silver-streaked black hair was swept up in a simple knot, and she wore spectacles as she reviewed ledgers at a large desk. The room was furnished like a proper office, with bookshelves, filing cabinets, and a small safe in the corner. She looked up as they entered, her shrewd eyes taking in each of them in turn. When her gaze landed on Eleanor, a slight smile, curved her lips. That's a poor disguise for such a lovely young woman, she observed mildly. But I appreciate the effort. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush beneath the dirt. Madame Rosalie set down her pen and removed her spectacles. Virgil Adamson. It's been, what, 5 years? 4, Virgil corrected with a grin. You're looking well, Rose, and you look like something the cat dragged in. Her gaze shifted to Nathaniel. You, I don't know, though that scar tells its own story. Finally, she looked back to Eleanor. And you, my dear, are far from home. How did you know? Eleanor asked, forgetting to lower her voice. Madame Rosalie's smile deepened. The way you stand, the way you entered the room, the quality of your hands, despite recent abuse. She gestured to Eleanor's still bandaged wrists. I was once a lady's companion in St. Louis. I recognize breeding when I see it. Nathaniel stepped forward. We need information, madame. Information costs, she replied smoothly. We can pay, he assured her. She raised an eyebrow. Perhaps. What information are you seeking? Virgil spoke up. Clayton Blackwell. We heard he might have done business with you recently. Sold something valuable. A flicker of wariness crossed her face. I deal with many people, Mr. Adamson. I don't discuss my business transactions. This would have been a silver locket, Eleanor said urgently. Heart-shaped, with roses engraved on the front and the initials E.H. on the back. It was stolen from me. Madame Rosalie studied Eleanor for a long moment. And you are Eleanor Hayes, she replied, deciding honesty might serve better than deception. Daughter of Thomas Hayes, of Hayes Shipping Company in San Francisco. Recognition dawned in the madame's eyes. I see. She turned to a cabinet behind her desk and unlocked it with a key from her chatelaine. After a moment of searching, she withdrew a folded newspaper and placed it on the desk. I think you should see this. It was a week-old copy of the San Francisco Chronicle. The headline made Eleanor's blood run cold. Shipping magnate Thomas Hayes dead in tragic accident. The room seemed to tilt beneath Eleanor's feet. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself as she scanned the article, her vision blurring with tears. No, she whispered, this can't be. According to the paper, Thomas Hayes had died when his carriage plunged from the road along the coastal cliffs south of the city. The article mentioned that control of Hayes Shipping had passed to his business partner, Edward Harrington, who expressed profound grief at the loss of his dear friend. I'm sorry, Madame Rosalie said, her voice gentler than before. I recognized your name when I read this. I didn't connect it until now. Eleanor sank into a chair, the newspaper clutched in trembling hands. Nathaniel moved to her side, his presence solid and reassuring in a world suddenly turned to quicksand. When did Clayton Blackwell come to you? He asked Madame Rosalie, his voice low but insistent. She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. 4 days ago, he had several items to sell. Pocket watches, jewelry taken from stagecoach passengers, I presume. She opened another drawer and removed a small object wrapped in velvet, and this was among them. She unwrapped the cloth to reveal Eleanor's locket, its silver surface gleaming in the lamplight. Eleanor reached for it with a choked sob. I didn't pay him what it was worth. Madame Rosalie continued. Something felt wrong about. Too fine to be in the hands of someone like Clayton Blackwell. She passed the locket to Eleanor. I intended to find out where it came from. Now I know. Eleanor clutched the locket to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Grief for her father mingled with a terrible certainty. Harrington had orchestrated everything, her kidnapping, her father's accident, the transfer of the company. Did Clayton mention anything about the locket's content? Nathaniel asked. Madame Rosalie nodded. He was frustrated, said he'd found nothing but a worthless paper inside. I told him quality pieces like that were valuable regardless of contents. She smiled slightly. He wasn't the brightest outlaw I've dealt with. Eleanor fumbled with the clasp, her fingers still unsteady from shock. The locket opened to reveal a small compartment, empty now. The paper, she said urgently. Where is it? Clayton took it with him, Madame Rosalie replied. Said he'd figure out what it meant or find someone who could. He mentioned heading to Tucson to meet someone. Nathaniel and Virgil exchanged glances. Who? Virgil asked. He didn't say a name, just that he had a contact there who might make sense of it. Eleanor closed the locket, her grief temporarily overshadowed by purpose. We need to get to Tucson. If we can find that paper, we might be able to prove what Harrington has done. Madame Rosalie rose from her desk and moved to the window. peering through the curtains to the street below. That may be difficult. 2 men have been asking questions at the bar about newcomers. From their description, they work for Harrington. Nathaniel's hand moved instinctively to his revolver. How many? Just the 2 for now. But Harrington has allies in Copper Canyon, the sheriff among them. She turned back to face them. There's a back exit through my private quarters. It leads to the stables. Take my carriage. My driver, Manuel, is trustworthy. Why are you helping us? Nathaniel asked, suspicious of such generosity. Madame Rosalie's expression hardened. Because 15 years ago, Edward Harrington ruined my husband's business, drove him to suicide, and tried to force me into his household as a companion. I built this place from nothing, despite his attempts to shut me down. Her eyes gleamed with old hatred. If you can bring him down, I'll consider it payment enough. She moved to a painting on the wall and swung it aside to reveal a small safe. From it, she withdrew a bundle of cash and a folded document, which she handed to Eleanor. Money for your journey, and a letter of introduction to Judge Isaac Montgomery in Tucson. He's an old friend, and no friend to Harrington. He'll help you if he can. Footsteps pounded on the stairs outside, followed by urgent knocking at the door. Madame Rosalie, trouble downstairs. Men asking about strangers. Go, she urged, pointing to a door at the far end of the room. Manuel will take you as far as the territorial line. After that, you're on your own. Nathaniel took Eleanor's arm, guiding her toward the escape route. Virgil paused, giving Madame Rosalie a brief bow. I owe you, Rose. She waved him off. Just make sure Harrington pays for what he's done. That's all the repayment I need. As they hurried through Madame Rosalie's private chambers, Eleanor clutched the locket tightly. Her father was gone, her life in San Francisco destroyed. But the locket, and whatever secret it contained, might be the key to justice. She glanced at Nathaniel, his scarred profile determined in the dim light of the corridor. We'll find that paper, he said, as if reading her thoughts. When we do, Harrington will answer for everything he's done. For the first time since learning of her father's death, Eleanor felt something beyond grief, a fierce resolve that matched the intensity in Nathaniel's eyes. Madame Rosalie's carriage rattled across the rugged terrain as night descended over the desert. Inside, Eleanor sat wrapped in a woolen blanket, the silver locket clutched in her palm like a talisman. Across from her, Nathaniel and Virgil spoke in low voices, plotting their course to Tucson. The initial shock of learning about her father's death had faded into a hollow ache in Eleanor's chest. Thomas Hayes had been her anchor, her constant in a world that treated women as decorative afterthoughts. He had been different, educating her about business, teaching her to stand on her own, preparing her to one day take her place in the company despite society's expectations. And now he was gone, murdered by the man he had trusted most. You should rest, Nathaniel said, interrupting her thoughts. His voice was gentler than she had ever heard it. We have a long journey ahead. Eleanor shook her head. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see my father. She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Nathaniel nodded, understanding in his gaze. He knew something about loss, about the images that haunted sleep. Tell me about him, he suggested. Your father? Eleanor looked up, surprised by the request. Virgil had dozed off in the corner of the carriage, his soft snores providing a rhythmic backdrop to the swaying vehicle. He was unconventional, she began hesitantly. My mother died when I was young. Instead of sending me to live with relatives or hiring a governess, he raised me himself, brought me to his office, taught me about shipping routes and contract negotiations. A small smile touched her lips. The other merchants thought he was mad. Sounds like a wise man, Nathaniel commented. He was, and kind. Her voice caught, even to Edward. That's what I can't understand. Harrington was like family to us. He dined at our table weekly. He brought me gifts from his travel. Her fingers tightened around the locket. How could he do this? What could possibly be worth power? Nathaniel said simply. Money. The same things men have killed for since the beginning of time. But he already had those things, Eleanor argued. The partnership with my father made him wealthy, respected. Some men can never have enough, Virgil mumbled, apparently not as asleep as he'd seemed. He opened one eye. And Hayes Shipping controls more than just cargo routes, doesn't it? Eleanor Eleanor looked at him sharply. What do you mean? Virgil sat up, rubbing his eyes. Your father's company. Word is, it's the only private outfit with contracts to transport government shipments. Gold from the mints, military supplies, documentation too sensitive for the regular mail. That's true, Eleanor confirmed. We've held those contracts for years. Father was very proud of the trust placed in him, and those contracts are worth millions. Virgil concluded. That's likely what Harrington was after, control of those government deals. The paper in your locket, Nathaniel added. Could it have been related to those contracts? Eleanor frowned, thinking possibly Father was secretive about certain aspects of the business, especially regarding government work. She turned the locket over in her hands. The timing makes sense. He gave this to me just before I left San Francisco, said it contained something that would secure our family's future. The carriage hit a particularly deep rut, jolting them all. Outside, the driver cursed in Spanish as he fought to control the horses. We're approaching the territorial line, Virgil observed, peering out the small window. Manuel will leave us there, as Rosalie instructed. Then what? Eleanor asked. Then we find alternate transportation to Tucson, Nathaniel replied. So we'll need supplies, fresh horses. The money Rosalie gave us should cover that, Virgil said, patting his coat pocket where the bundle of cash was secured. Eleanor's fingers traced the intricate engraving on the locket. Even if we reach Tucson, how will we find Clayton's contact? We don't have a name, a description, nothing. We start with Judge Montgomery, Nathaniel said. Rosalie's letter of introduction might open doors. If Clayton was meeting someone who could decode a government cipher, it would likely be someone with connections to official channels. Assuming Clayton even made it to Tucson, Virgil pointed out, he could have been intercepted by Harrington's men, or gotten himself killed in a card game, or any number of things. We have to try, Eleanor insisted. It's the only lead we have. The carriage began to slow. Manuel called out softly, Senor, Senorita, we are here. They had reached a crossroads, marked by a weathered wooden sign. To the west lay Copper Canyon, now miles behind them. The eastern fork led deeper into the territory, eventually to Tucson. The northern path would take them toward the railroad and possibly a faster route to their destination. Manuel helped them from the carriage, then unloaded their few possessions, Nathaniel's rifle and saddlebags, Virgil's pack of tools and supplies, and a small bundle of women's clothing Madame Rosalie had provided for Eleanor. Madame says to tell you, there is a trading post 2 miles east, Manuel explained, pointing down the road. The owner, Gideon, is a friend. He will help you. With a tip of his hat and a quick "Vaya con Dios," the driver climbed back onto his seat and turned the carriage around, disappearing into the night toward Copper Canyon. The 3 travelers stood alone at the crossroads, the vast desert stretching around them under a canopy of stars. The night was cold, the silence absolute. 2 miles, Virgil sighed, shouldering his pack. These old bones aren't what they used to be. They set off down the eastern road, walking in single file. Nathaniel led, rifle ready, while Virgil took the rear. Eleanor walked between them, still dressed in her boy's disguise, though it felt less necessary now that they were far from town. The trading post appeared just as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, a low adobe structure with a corral of horses to one side and a well out front. A single lantern burned in the window, its glow a beacon in the fading darkness. As they approached, the door opened. A man stepped onto the porch, shotgun held casually but ready. He was tall and lean, with a gray beard that reached his chest and skin darkened by decades in the sun. That's far enough, he called. State your business. We're friends of Rosalie's, Virgil replied, stepping forward. She said Gideon would help us. The man lowered his shotgun slightly. Rosalie sent you, did she? What's she calling me these days? She didn't call you anything, Nathaniel answered cautiously. Just said you were a friend. A wheezing laugh escaped the old man. That's my Rose, always diplomatic. He set the shotgun aside and gestured them forward. Come in before someone sees you. Harrington's men passed through here yesterday, asking questions about a scarred bounty hunter and a kidnapped heiress. Eleanor's heart sank. They're ahead of us, headed to Tucson, Gideon confirmed, ushering them inside. 4 of them, well-armed and mean-looking, offered good money for information. The interior of the trading post was cluttered but clean, filled with shelves of supplies, barrels of dried goods, and racks of clothing. A pot of coffee bubbled on a small stove in the corner, filling the space with its rich aroma. "You told them nothing, I hope," Virgil said, settling into a chair with a grateful sigh. Gideon poured coffee into tin cups and passed them around. "Told them I'd seen a group fitting their description heading north toward the railroad. Should buy you some time." He turned to Eleanor, his gaze shrewd. "Oh, you'd be Thomas Hayes' girl, then?" She nodded, surprised. "You knew my father?" "Served with him briefly during the war. Good man. Read about his accident in the paper." He made no attempt to hide his skepticism about the official story. "Not surprised to see Harrington making his move. Always was. A snake." "You know Harrington?" Nathaniel asked, accepting a cup of coffee. "Know of him," Gideon corrected. "Or his reputation precedes him. Man's been buying up businesses, bribing officials, and eliminating competition for years." He looked at Eleanor. "No offense, miss, but your father was too trusting by half." "None taken," she replied softly. "I'm beginning to realize that myself." Gideon refilled their cup. "So, you're bound for Tucson, looking for something Clayton Blackwell took there, I'd wager." Nathaniel's hand moved subtly toward his revolver. "Rosalie talks too much." "Rosalie and I go back 30 years, Gideon said with a shrug. "She sends a message ahead when she can. Carry a pigeon. Faster than you walking, that's for sure." "Then you know what we're after," Virgil said. "A piece of paper with government ciphers, according to Rose." Gideon stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And I might know who Clayton was meeting in Tucson." Eleanor sat forward eagerly. "Who?" "Former Union Army intelligence officer named Prescott. Ezekiel Prescott. Works as a clerk in the land office now, but still has connections to military intelligence." Gideon's expression turned grave. "That he's also deep in debt to a certain gambling house that happens to be owned by one of Harrington's associates." "Convenient," Nathaniel observed dryly. "Indeed." Gideon moved to a cupboard and withdrew a rolled map, which he spread on the table. "Tucson is still 2 days' hard ride from here. Harrington's men will have arrived by now and will be watching the main road." He traced an alternate route with his finger. "There's another way. Follows an old Apache trail through the mountain. Rougher terrain, but it'll get you there undetected if you're careful." "We'll need horses," Nathaniel said. "Supplies," Gideon nodded. "I can provide those. Got 3 good mounts in the corral. They're yours for a fair price." While Virgil negotiated with Gideon for the supplies they would need, Nathaniel pulled Eleanor aside. "This journey is getting more dangerous," he said quietly. "Harrington's net is tightening. In Tucson, we'll be walking into his territory with little protection and no guarantee that this Prescott fellow will help us." "What are you suggesting?" Eleanor asked, though she already knew. "That you consider alternatives. We could get you to the railroad. There are still people in San Francisco who would help you. Your father's friends, associates who weren't in Harrington's pocket." Eleanor shook her head firmly. "No. I won't run and hide while that man profits from my father's murder. The paper in my locket is the key to proving what he's done. I'm going to Tucson." Nathaniel studied her face, noting the determination that had replaced the shock and grief of earlier days. The pampered heiress he had cut down from that post was gone, transformed by adversity into something stronger, more resolute. "All right," he conceded. "But from now on, you do exactly as I say. When I say it, no arguments, no hesitations. Our lives may depend on it." "Agreed," she said without hesitation. Outside, the sun had fully risen, bathing the desert in golden light. A new day, bringing them one step closer to Tucson and to the truth that waited there, hidden in a coded message meant for Eleanor's father. A truth that Edward Harrington would kill to keep buried. As Gideon prepared the horses and Virgil gathered supplies, Eleanor moved to the trading post's small port. She opened the locket once more, running her thumb over the empty compartment where the paper had been. "I'll find it, Father," she whispered, "and I'll make him pay. I promise." Behind her, Nathaniel watched silently, his scarred face solemn. He had sworn to protect her, to see her safely through this ordeal. But as the danger grew, and the odds mounted against them. He wondered if this was a promise he could keep. The old Apache trail wound through the mountains like a serpent, narrow and treacherous. Rock formations jutted from the earth like giants' teeth, casting long shadows across their path as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. The air was thin at this elevation, each breath a conscious effort as their horses picked their way along the precipitous route. Eleanor rode between Nathaniel and Virgil as had become their custom. She had abandoned her boy's disguise for the practical riding clothes Madame Rosalie had provided, a split skirt and sturdy blouse that allowed freedom of movement while offering protection from the elements. Her hair was braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, her fair skin already darkening from constant exposure to the sun. They had been traveling for a day and a half since leaving Gideon's trading post, seeing no other souls save for a distant band of Apache hunters who had observed them briefly before disappearing over a ridge. According to Gideon's map, they were now less than a day's ride from Tucson. "We'll make camp in that canyon ahead," Nathaniel announced, pointing to a narrow opening in the rock face. "There's water there, according to Gideon, and shelter from the wind," Eleanor nodded, too weary to speak. The physical demands of their journey had been greater than anything she had ever experienced, but she had not complained once. Each mile brought her closer to the truth about her father's death, closer to justice. She would endure whatever hardships that journey required. The canyon proved to be more hospitable than its forbidding entrance suggested. A small spring bubbled from the rock, feeding a clear pool before meandering away down the slope. Stunted junipers provided both firewood and screening from any watchful eyes. They made camp efficiently, each falling into tasks that had become routine over their days of travel. As dusk settled over the land, they gathered around a small fire, sharing a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and coffee. Virgil had withdrawn a battered harmonica from his pack and was playing a soft, melancholy tune that echoed gently off the canyon walls. Eleanor found herself studying Nathaniel's face in the firelight. The scar that bisected his features seemed less harsh somehow, or perhaps she had simply grown accustomed to it. Beneath the weathered exterior and watchful eyes, she occasionally glimpsed something else, a gentleness, a capacity for kindness that his hard life had not entirely extinguished. "We should reach Tucson by midday tomorrow," he said, catching her gaze. "Once there, we'll need to locate Prescott without alerting Harrington's men to our presence." "The judge might help with that," Virgil suggested, setting aside his harmonica. "If Rosalie's letter of introduction carries the weight she believes it does, and if Prescott still has the paper," Eleanor added quietly. The possibility that they might reach Tucson only to find the trail had gone cold was a fear she tried to suppress. "One step at a time," Nathaniel counseled. "First, we get to the city undetected. Then we find Judge Montgomery. Then Prescott." Eleanor nodded, then winced as a sharp pain shot through her shoulders. Days in the saddle had left her muscles knotted and aching, though she tried not to show it. Nathaniel noticed. Of course, he noticed everything. "You should rest. I'll take first what?" "I'm fine," she insisted automatically. A faint smile touched his lips. "You're exhausted, and tomorrow may be the most dangerous day of our journey. Sleep while you can." She couldn't argue with his logic. With a grateful nod, she retired to her bedroll, which Virgil had thoughtfully placed in a small alcove that offered additional protection from the element. Despite her fatigue, sleep eluded her for some time. Her mind raced with thoughts of Tucson, of Prescott, of the coded paper that might prove Harrington's treachery, and of Nathaniel Hawke, the scarred hunter who had become something more than a rescuer to her, though she dared not examine those feelings too closely. Eventually, exhaustion claimed her, pulling her into a dreamless sleep. She woke to Nathaniel's hand on her shoulder, his voice low and urgent. "Eleanor, wake up. We have company." The fire had been extinguished, leaving only the pale light of dawn to illuminate the canyon. Eleanor sat up quickly, instantly alert, despite the early hour. "Riders," Nathaniel explained, helping her to her feet, "coming up the trail from the west. Harrington's men," she whispered. "Maybe, or Apache, or simple travelers. Either way, we're exposed here." Virgil was already saddling the horses, moving with surprising speed and silence for a man his age. Their camp had been dismantled, all traces of their presence erased, save for the fresh hoofprints that would be impossible to hide. "What's the plan?" Eleanor asked, gathering her few belongings. "We move east, deeper into the mountains," Nathaniel replied. "There's another trail that can take us to Tucson, though it's even rougher than this one." They mounted quickly, Nathaniel leading them toward a narrow defile that snaked between towering rock formations. The passage was so tight in places that they had to proceed single file, their stirrups occasionally scraping against the stone walls. Behind them, voices echoed off the canyon walls, men's voices, speaking English, not Apache then. And few simple travelers would venture this far into the mountains on such a difficult trail. "Harrington's men," Virgil confirmed in a whisper, "must have picked up our trail somehow." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "Or had help." Gideon seemed trustworthy. "But everyone has a price." "You think he betrayed us?" Eleanor asked, dismayed by the possibility. "I think Harrington's reach is long and his pockets deep," Nathaniel replied grimly. "They keep moving." The defile opened onto a small plateau, with the trail continuing along a narrow ledge that hugged the mountainside. Far below, the desert floor stretched like a vast, tawny sea. The drop was sheer and deadly. They had just started along the ledge when a rifle shot cracked through the morning air. The bullet struck the rock face inches from Nathaniel's head, sending stone splinters flying. "They go," he shouted, drawing his revolver and turning his horse to face the threat. Eleanor hesitated, unwilling to leave him behind. "Now, Eleanor," he commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Virgil grabbed her horse's bridle, pulling her forward along the trail. "He knows what he's doing, girl. Come on!" With a last desperate glance at Nathaniel, Eleanor urged her horse after Virgil. Behind them, more shots rang out, followed by the thunder of Nathaniel's rifle in response. The ledge widened into another small plateau, this one scattered with boulders that offered potential cover. Virgil directed her behind the largest one, dismounting quickly and drawing his shotgun. "Stay low," he instructed. "I'm going back for Nate." "I'm coming with you," she insisted, reaching for the small derringer she now kept in her pocket. Virgil's weathered face softened briefly. "You've got grit, I'll give you that. But Nathaniel would never forgive me if anything happened to you. Stay here." Before she could protest further, he was gone, moving back along the trail with surprising stealth for a man his age. Eleanor pressed herself against the boulder, heart pounding in her chest. The gunfire had stopped, which could mean anything: victory, defeat, a temporary lull. The uncertainty was agonizing. Long minutes passed. Then footsteps approached, too many footsteps. She peered cautiously around the edge of the boulder. 3 men were making their way onto the plateau. 2 wore the dust-covered attire of hired guns, while the third was dressed in a manner that spoke of wealth and city life, despite the trail dirt on his boots. All 3 carried rifles. "Spread out," the well-dressed man ordered. They can't have gone far. The girl is the priority. Harrington wants her alive." Eleanor shrank back behind the boulder, mind racing. Where were Nathaniel and Virgil? Had they been captured? Killed? She clutched the derringer, knowing its 2 shots would be woefully inadequate against 3 armed men. The sound of a horse nickering nearby betrayed her position. Footsteps approached her hiding place. "Well, well," a voice drawled. "What have we here?" The well-dressed man stood before her, rifle aimed casually in her direction. His companions flanked him, predatory grins on their weathered faces. "Miss Hayes," the man continued, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "I'm Marcus Bell, head of security for Hayes Shipping, or rather Harrington Shipping now. Mr. Harrington sends his regards." Eleanor's blood ran cold. This was the man she had recognized from Harrington's employ during their encounter on the trail days ago, the man who had likely supervised her father's murder. "Where are my friends?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. Bell's smile didn't reach his eyes. The old man took a tumble off the trail, unfortunate at his age. "As for your scarred protector," he shrugged, "but let's just say he won't be troubling anyone anymore." Grief and rage surged through Eleanor in equal measure. She raised the derringer, aiming it at Bell's chest. He laughed. Now, Miss Hayes, that little pop gun won't help you. Besides, Mr. Harrington wants you alive, though he didn't specify what condition you needed to be in." His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Put it down, and we'll make this journey back to San Francisco as comfortable as possible." "I'd rather die," she spat. "That can be arranged," one of the other men growled, raising his rifle. Bell held up a hand. "Patience, Jenkins. Mr. Harrington's instructions were clear. She has information he needs. I know nothing about any coded paper, Eleanor said. The derringer still aimed at Belle's chest. Belle's eyebrows rose in surprise. A coded paper? Is that what you think this is about? He laughed again, the sound chilling in its genuine amusement. My dear Miss Hayes, Harrington couldn't care less about some coded message. What he wants is you, the sole heir to Hayes Shipping. With you as his ward, his control of the company is absolute and uncontestable. I would never consent to that, Eleanor declared. Consent? Belle's smile turned cruel. Undo. Who said anything about consent? San Francisco's finest doctors are quite adept at treating female hysteria. A few months in their care, and you'll agree to anything Mr. Harrington suggests. He stepped forward, hand outstretched. Now, be a good girl, and a shot rang out, and Belle staggered backward, a red stain blossoming on his shoulder. He dropped to one knee, cursing viciously. Get down! A familiar voice shouted from somewhere above. Eleanor dove to the ground as more shots erupted around her. One of Belle's men fell, clutching his chest. The other returned fire, aiming at a figure moving among the rocks on the ridge above. Nathaniel. He was alive, firing with deadly precision as he worked his way down toward the plateau. The remaining gunman, realizing he was outmatched, grabbed Belle and began dragging him toward cover. "And this isn't over, girl," Belle shouted, his face contorted with pain and rage. "Harrington will find you." They disappeared behind a cluster of boulders on the far side of the plateau. Moments later, the sound of retreating horses confirmed their departure. Eleanor remained where she was, trembling with relief and residual fear. Nathaniel appeared at her side, kneeling to check her for injuries. "Oh, are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. She shook her head, then launched herself into his arms, clinging to him with desperate strength. "They said you were dead." "And Virgil." "I'm fine," he assured her, his arms encircling her hesitantly, then more securely. "Virgil took a fall, but he's alive. Legs injured, though. He can't ride." Eleanor pulled back, scanning his face. There was a fresh cut above his eye, and his shirt was torn and blood-stained, though whether the blood was his or someone else's, she couldn't tell. "Belle said something strange," she said, still trying to process the encounter. "He said Harrington doesn't care about the coded paper. He wants me as his ward to solidify his claim on the company." Nathaniel's expression darkened. "That makes a certain kind of sense. With you under his control, his position would be unassailable." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "But it doesn't explain why your father gave you that locket, or why Clayton was taking the paper to someone who could decode it." "No," Eleanor agreed. "There's still something we're missing, something important enough that my father risked sending it with me instead of keeping it himself." Nathaniel helped her to her feet. "Oh, do we need to get to Tucson? Find Prescott, get answers." He looked back toward the trail. "But first, we need to help Virgil." Tucson sprawled across the desert basin like a scattered handful of sun-bleached stones. From their vantage point on a ridge overlooking the settlement, Eleanor could see the central plaza, the church with its bell tower, and the dusty streets lined with adobe buildings. The territorial capital was larger than she had imagined, yet still dwarfed by the vast wilderness surrounding it. Virgil sat propped against a boulder nearby, his splinted leg stretched out before him. The fall had left him with a broken tibia, painful but not life-threatening thanks to Nathaniel's field medicine. Still, he wouldn't be walking for some time. "We can't all go into town," Nathaniel said, lowering the spyglass he'd been using to survey the approaches to Tucson. "Harrington's men will be watching for 3 travelers, a scarred man, a young woman, and an old-timer." "I'm not that old," Virgil grumbled, wincing as he shifted his position. Eleanor knelt beside him, adjusting the makeshift pillow they'd fashioned from a rolled blanket. "You're staying here regardless. That leg needs proper medical attention, not more jostling on horseback." Virgil couldn't argue with that. The journey from the plateau where he'd fallen had been excruciating, even with the crude travois they'd constructed to transport him. "I'll go alone," Nathaniel decided. "Find Judge Montgomery, locate Prescott, get the paper." "No," Eleanor said firmly, rising to face him. "We go together." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "It's too dangerous. Bell and his remaining man may still be in Tucson, and there could be others. All the more reason not to split up," she countered. "Besides, If Judge Montgomery is as proper as Madame Rosalie suggested, he may not speak freely to a man of your appearance. She gestured vaguely at his scarred face and trail-worn attire. But a lady in distress, that might open doors more quickly. Virgil chuckled from his place on the ground. She's got you there, Nate. Nathaniel scowled, but Eleanor could see he was considering her argument. She pressed her advantage. We've come too far for you to leave me behind now. I've earned the right to see this through. His eyes met hers, searching. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he finally nodded. We go together, but you stay close. Do exactly as I say, and if trouble starts, I run. She finished for him. I know the drill by now, Mr. Hawke. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I suppose you do, Miss Hayes. They left Virgil with water, food, and Nathaniel's rifle for protection, promising to return by nightfall. If they didn't, he was to make his way to a small ranch belonging to a friend of Gideon's, located a few miles south. The descent into Tucson took nearly an hour as they followed a winding trail down from the ridge. Eleanor had changed back into the dress Madame Rosalie had provided, a simple blue cotton garment that may, while not fashionable, at least allowed her to pass for a respectable woman rather than a trail-worn drifter. Nathaniel had done what he could to improve his appearance, shaving his trail beard and donning a clean shirt, though nothing could disguise the prominent scar that bisected his face. They entered town from the east, avoiding the main road where sentries might be watching. Nathaniel had decided they would pose as a married couple seeking land, common enough in the territory that they wouldn't draw undue attention. Eleanor wore her locket openly now, a tangible reminder of what they sought. The courthouse stood at the north end of the plaza, a two-story brick building with white columns that seemed transported from another world compared to the adobe structures surrounding it. A territorial flag hung limply in the still afternoon air. Wait here, Nathaniel murmured as they approached the courthouse steps. Let me make sure it's safe, Eleanor nodded, taking a seat on a wooden bench beneath a cottonwood tree. From this position, she could observe the plaza, while remaining partially concealed by the tree's drooping branches. Nathaniel climbed the steps and disappeared inside. Minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Eleanor found herself studying each passerby, searching for signs they might be Harrington's men. A well-dressed gentleman crossing the plaza, a pair of cowboys emerging from a saloon, a harried-looking clerk hurrying toward the land office. The clerk, something about him caught her attention, his nervous demeanor, perhaps, or the way his eyes darted about as he walked. He was thin, scholarly-looking, with spectacles perched on a narrow nose. Could this be Prescott? Before she could consider further, Nathaniel emerged from the courthouse, accompanied by an older man with iron-gray hair and a dignified bearing. Judge Montgomery, she presumed. They descended the steps together, the judge nodding gravely as Nathaniel spoke. When they reached her, Nathaniel made the introductions. Eleanor, this is Judge Isaac Montgomery. Judge, may I present Miss Eleanor Hayes? The judge bowed formally. Miss Hayes, I'm deeply sorry about your father. Thomas was an honorable businessman in a field where such men are increasingly rare. You knew my father? Eleanor asked, surprised. We corresponded occasionally on matters of mutual interest. I held your father in high esteem. His expression turned grave. Mr. Hawke has explained your situation. Madame Rosalie's letter was most persuasive, but unnecessary. I would have helped you regardless, given the circumstances. Then you believe us about Harrington? Eleanor asked. The judge's mouth tightened. Edward Harrington's reputation precedes him, even here in the territory. I've had professional dealings with him in the past. Nothing I could prove in court, unfortunately, but enough to know he is not a man to be trusted. He glanced around the plaza cautiously. And this is not the place to discuss such matters. Please accompany me to my residence. We can speak freely there. They followed the judge through a series of side streets to a modest but well-maintained house set back from the road. A servant admitted them to a cool interior furnished with heavy wooden pieces and shelves, lined with law books. Once they were seated in his study with glasses of cool water, The judge locked the door and turned to them with a serious expression. "Now, tell me about this coded paper you seek." Eleanor explained about the locket, her father's instructions to keep it safe, and Clayton Blackwell's apparent meeting with Ezekiel Prescott to decode the content. Prescott, the judge mused. Yes, he works at the land office, former military intelligence, though he doesn't advertise the fact. If anyone in Tucson could decipher a government code, it would be him. "Do you know where we can find him?" Nathaniel asked. "He rents rooms above Donovan's Mercantile on Pennington Street." The judge frowned. "But I should warn you, Prescott has a weakness for gambling. It's led him into debt and consequently into associations with unsavory characters, including Harrington's people," Eleanor guessed. "Possibly." The judge rose and moved to his desk, withdrawing a small revolver from a drawer. "I suggest I accompany you to see Prescott. My position affords some protection, and he might be more forthcoming with an official present." Nathaniel considered this, then nodded. "Thank you, Judge." As they prepared to leave, Eleanor caught sight of a newspaper on the judge's desk, the latest edition of the Tucson Citizen. The headline made her breath catch. "Hayes shipping merger announced. Harrington takes control." The judge followed her gaze. It was in yesterday's paper. Harrington has been moving quickly to consolidate his position. "According to this, he's already secured the government contracts your father's company held." "That's not possible," Eleanor protested. "Those contracts required my father's personal guarantee. The government wouldn't simply transfer them to Harrington. Unless," Nathaniel said slowly, "Harrington had something the government wanted or needed." The judge nodded grimly. "The rumors say he's offered exclusive shipping rights to the new silver mines in Nevada at rates well below market value. He's buying his way into power," Eleanor said bitterly, "using my father's company to do it. All the more reason to find that paper," the judge replied, checking his revolver before tucking it into his coat pocket. "If it contains what I suspect it might, it could be the key to stopping him." They left the judge's house by a back entrance, making their way through narrow alleys toward Pennington Street. The afternoon heat was intense, the sun beating down on the dusty streets with merciless force. Few people were about at this hour, most having retreated indoors until evening brought cooler temperatures. Donovan's Mercantile was a two-story building with a covered porch and large display windows showcasing everything from farm implements to ladies' hats. A wooden staircase at the side of the building led to the second-floor rooms. "Wait here," the judge instructed, gesturing to the shade of the porch. "Let me speak to Prescott first. My presence alone won't raise suspicions." Eleanor and Nathaniel watched as he climbed the stairs and knocked on a door at the far end of the balcony. After a moment, the door opened, revealing the same nervous-looking clerk Eleanor had spotted earlier in the plaza. A brief conversation ensued, with the judge doing most of the talking. Finally, Prescott stepped back, allowing the judge to enter. "That's him," Eleanor whispered. "It is the clerk I saw earlier." Nathaniel's hand moved casually to his revolver. "Stay alert. I don't like this." Minutes passed. The street remained quiet. The only sounds the distant barking of a dog and the creaking of a windmill somewhere nearby. Eleanor found herself clutching her locket, thumb tracing the engraved roses on its surface. Suddenly, a shot rang out from above, then another. Nathaniel drew his revolver in one fluid motion, pushing Eleanor behind a stack of barrels. "Stay down!" He was halfway up the stairs when the door burst open. Judge Montgomery stumbled out, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. Behind him, Prescott appeared, a smoking pistol in his hand. "Run!" the judge shouted. "It's a trap!" Prescott fired again, the bullet splintering the wooden railing near the judge's head. Nathaniel returned fire, forcing Prescott back into the doorway. The judge staggered down the stairs, nearly falling. Nathaniel caught him, dragging him toward the barrels where Eleanor waited. "We need to move," Nathaniel urged, helping the judge to his feet. "Now!" More shots erupted. This time from the street, two riders had appeared, rifles aimed in their direction. Bell's remaining man and another hired gun, judging by their appearance. "This way," Eleanor called, spotting an alley behind the Mercantile. They ran, the judge wincing with each step but keeping pace. Bullets kicked up dust at their heels as they ducked into the narrow passage between buildings. Behind them, shouts and the thunder of hooves indicated pursuit. "Prescott," the judge gasped as they ran, "working for Harrington." "Ambush. Did he have the paper?" Nathaniel demanded, guiding them through a maze of back alleys. The judge nodded, fumbling in his coat pocket with his good hand. "Got this before he shot me." He withdrew a folded piece of paper, stained with what appeared to be coffee or whiskey, its edges worn from handling. Eleanor took it with trembling fingers, recognizing it immediately by the distinctive watermark visible in one corner, her father's personal stationery. "No time to examine it now," Nathaniel said, urging them forward as the sounds of pursuit grew closer. "We need to get back to Virgil and out of Tucson before they seal the town." As they ran through the dusty back streets of Tucson, the coded paper secure in Eleanor's possession at last, she couldn't help but wonder, what secret was worth so much blood and betrayal? And would they live long enough to discover it? Dusk painted the desert in shades of amber and purple as they fled Tucson, pushing their horses as hard as they dared along the rocky trail leading back to Virgil's hiding place. Judge Montgomery rode double with Nathaniel, his wounded arm bound tightly with strips torn from Eleanor's petticoat. The judge's face was ashen, his jaw clenched against the pain of the bullet lodged in his upper arm. "We're being followed," Nathaniel announced grimly, glancing over his shoulder at the dust cloud rising behind them. 4, maybe 5 riders. "Bell?" Eleanor said, the name like a curse on her lips. "He must have been waiting in town for us." The judge groaned as the horse jolted over uneven ground. "Prescott must have signaled him somehow." "I didn't see it coming." "None of us did," Nathaniel replied, his tone betraying rare self-recrimination. "I should have been more cautious." Eleanor urged her horse alongside his. "This isn't your fault. If anything, I've dragged you into my troubles from the beginning." His eyes met hers briefly, something unspoken passing between them. "You haven't dragged me anywhere I didn't choose to go, Miss Hayes." They reached the base of the ridge where they had left Virgil and began the steep ascent. The trail narrowed, forcing them to proceed single file. Eleanor led the way, Nathaniel and the judge following closely behind. The pursuit had fallen back somewhat. The terrain was unfavorable for a direct confrontation, which gave them a temporary advantage. Virgil was waiting exactly where they had left him, rifle ready across his lap. His face brightened at their approach, then darkened as he took in the judge's condition and their obvious haste. "Trouble?" he asked unnecessarily. "The usual kind," Nathaniel replied, helping the judge dismount before easing him to the ground beside Virgil. "Bell and his men are right behind us. Prescott turned out to be Harrington's man, but we got the paper," Eleanor added, patting her pocket where the precious document was secured. Virgil nodded toward the judge's wound. "How bad?" "Bad enough," Nathaniel answered, already unpacking medical supplies from his saddlebag. "Bullet's still in there. Needs to come out before infection sets in." The judge's face was now a sickly gray, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cooling evening air. "Don't worry about me," he managed. "Read the paper. More important." Eleanor knelt beside him, genuine concern in her expression. "You first, Judge. The paper can wait a few minutes." She helped Nathaniel as he cleaned and examined the wound. The bullet had entered the fleshy part of the upper arm, missing bone, but lodging deep in the muscle. Extraction would be painful but necessary. "Hold him steady," Nathaniel instructed, withdrawing a knife and a pair of small forceps from his medical kit. Virgil gripped the judge's good shoulder while Eleanor held his legs, preparing for his inevitable thrashing once Nathaniel began. "A bite on this," Nathaniel said, offering the judge a folded leather strap. "This won't be pleasant." The judge nodded grimly, accepting the strap between his teeth. His eyes met Nathaniel's, resolute despite his pain. What followed was a brutal but necessary surgery, performed with the efficiency of a man who had extracted many bullets under less than ideal conditions. The judge bore it remarkably well, losing consciousness only when Nathaniel finally extracted the misshapen lead ball from his flesh. "He's tough for a courthouse man," Virgil observed, helping Nathaniel bandage the wound. "He's lost a lot of blood," Nathaniel replied, "but he'll live if infection doesn't set in." Eleanor had stepped away during the procedure, unable to watch the judge's suffering despite her determination to be strong. Now she returned, the folded paper in her hands. "I think it's time we learned what this is all about," she said quietly. She unfolded the paper carefully. The sheet was covered in rows of letters and numbers, arranged in seemingly random groupings. At the top, in her father's distinctive handwriting, was a brief note. "Eleanor, the key is your mother's favorite sonnet, line 12. Father, a cipher," Virgil observed. peering at the paper. Military grade, from the look of it, Eleanor frowned. My mother's favorite sonnet. That could be any one of dozens. She loved poetry. Think, Nathaniel urged gently. Your father wouldn't have chosen something you couldn't remember. Eleanor closed her eyes, searching her memory. Her mother had died when she was 9, but certain details remained vivid. Her perfume, the sound of her laugh, the way she would read poetry aloud on rainy afternoons. One poem in particular had been a constant, read so often that Eleanor had memorized it alongside her mother. Shakespeare, she whispered, opening her eyes. Sonnet 116, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. She looked up at Nathaniel. Uta, she had it inscribed inside her wedding ring. Father kept it on his watch chain after she died. Virgil shifted positions, wincing as his splinted leg protested the movement. Line 12, he said. What's line 12? Eleanor recited from memory. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Rosy lips and cheeks, Nathaniel repeated thoughtfully. Like the roses engraved on your locket. Eleanor clutched the silver heart that hung around her neck. You think the engraving was a clue to the cipher key? Your father was a careful man, Nathaniel said. He wouldn't leave anything to chance. Eleanor studied the paper again. But how do we use this line to decode the message? Virgil held out his hand. May I? I did some work with ciphers during the war. She passed him the paper, and he examined it with a practiced eye. It's a visionaire cipher. The line from the sonnet is the key phrase. Each letter in the key corresponds to a shift in the alphabet. He pointed to the first grouping of letters. We align the key phrase with the coded text, then shift each letter backward by the corresponding letter in the key. Can you decode it? Nathaniel asked. Virgil shook his head reluctantly. Given time and proper light, maybe, but it's getting dark, and my eyes aren't what they used to be. A groan from the judge drew their attention. He was regaining consciousness, his eyes fluttering open. Harrington, he murmured weakly. Government contracts. Eleanor moved to his side, offering water from her canteen. Take it easy, Judge. You've been through an ordeal. He drank, then continued with obvious effort. The contracts. Your father's company, not just shipping. He gripped her hand with surprising strength. Weapons, secret development, new rifles. For the army. Nathaniel's expression sharpened. What kind of rifles? Repeating. Rifle, the judge whispered. Faster, more accurate than anything. Confederate sympathizers would pay a fortune. Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face. That's why Harrington moved so quickly to secure the government contracts. It wasn't just about shipping routes. It was about controlling the development and transport of these new weapons and selling information to the highest bidder, Nathaniel added grimly. Indeed, there are still plenty of Confederate holdouts and foreign interests who would pay handsomely for American military secrets. The judge nodded weakly. Your father discovered Harrington's plan? That paper probably proves his treason. A distant shout interrupted their conversation. The riders pursuing them had reached the base of the ridge and were beginning their ascent. They've found our trail, Nathaniel said, moving to the edge of their hiding place to assess the threat. We've got minutes at most. We can't move the judge in his condition, Eleanor protested, and Virgil can't ride with his leg. Nathaniel's face hardened into the mask of the hunter she had first encountered, all emotion buried beneath grim purpose. You'll take the paper and ride north. There's a Union Army outpost at Fort Breckenridge, about 30 miles from here. Get this information to the commanding officer. I'm not leaving you, she insisted, rising to face him. This isn't a debate, Eleanor. His voice was gentle but unyielding. That paper is the only proof of Harrington's treason. If Bell gets his hands on it, your father died for nothing. Virgil shifted, positioning himself where he could cover the trail with Nathaniel's rifle. He's right, girl. You need to go. We'll hold them off long enough for you to get clear. Eleanor looked from Virgil to the unconscious judge to Nathaniel, conflict evident in her expression. Everything within her rebelled at the thought of abandoning them. Yet she knew they were right. The paper was what mattered, the evidence that could bring Harrington to justice. How will I find you again? She asked Nathaniel, her voice barely audible. Something flickered in his eyes, a warmth that belied his hardened exterior. I'll find you, I promise. The sound of approaching horses grew louder. Go, he urged. Now, stay off the main trails. Trust your horse. These animals know the desert better than we do. She mounted quickly, tucking the precious paper securely inside her bodice. For a moment, she hesitated, looking down at Nathaniel. Words seemed inadequate for what needed to be said. Instead, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his, a brief but fervent kiss that spoke volumes. Then she straightened, her face resolute. "Don't you dare die, Nathaniel Hawke," she commanded, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "I have plans that require your continued existence." A rare smile touched his scarred face. "Yes, ma'am." With that, she turned her horse and rode, not looking back, even as the first shots echoed behind her. Tears streamed freely down her face now, but her spine remained straight, her determination unshaken. She would reach Fort Breckenridge. She would deliver the evidence. And somehow, she would find her way back to the scarred hunter who had become so much more than her rescuer. Behind her, Nathaniel watched until she disappeared into the gathering darkness. Then he turned to face the approaching riders, his expression deadly calm as he drew his revolver. "Ready, old friend?" he asked Virgil, who had positioned himself behind a boulder, rifle aimed at the trail. Virgil grinned, the same reckless smile that had served him through countless battles. "Been ready. These boys are about to learn why folks don't corner old wolves in their dens." The first rider appeared on the trail below. Nathaniel took aim, his mind clear of all thoughts save one: give Eleanor enough time to escape. Whatever happened after that didn't matter. The shot rang out, echoing across the darkening canyon like a promise. 2 weeks later, Eleanor stood at the window of a suite in San Francisco's Grand Hotel, watching fog roll in from the bay. She wore a black mourning dress, the silver locket gleaming at her throat. Behind her, Army Colonel James Hargrove studied documents spread across a mahogany table, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. "This evidence is irrefutable, Miss Hayes," he said, gathering the papers into a leather portfolio. "Harrington will be arrested tomorrow on charges of treason, conspiracy, and murder. The cipher your father created was ingenious. Dates, locations, names of Confederate agents. He documented everything." Eleanor turned from the window. "And Hayes Shipping will be returned to your control as your father's sole heir," the colonel assured her. "The government contracts will be honored. Your father's reputation will be restored." She nodded, relief washing through her. The nightmare was finally ending. After reaching Fort Breckenridge, she had been escorted under military protection to San Francisco, where Army intelligence officers had worked tirelessly to decode the full document using the key she provided. The contents had proven even more damning than they had imagined. Edward Harrington hadn't just been planning to sell secrets, he had already been doing so for over a year, compromising national security for his own profit. "There is one other matter," Colonel Hargrove added, his tone softening. "We've received word about your companion." Eleanor's heart seized. For 2 weeks, she had heard nothing of Nathaniel, Virgil, or Judge Montgomery. The uncertainty had been its own special torment. "Are they—" She couldn't finish the question. "Alive," the colonel confirmed. "All 3 of them, though not without injury. They managed to hold off Bell's men long enough for a patrol from Fort Breckenridge to arrive. Your information about their location proved accurate." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed with relief. Where are they now?" "The judge is recovering at his home in Tucson. The older gentleman, Virgil, I believe, is being treated at the Fort Infirmary for his broken leg." Hargrove hesitated. "As for the other man, Hawke—" "Yes?" Eleanor prompted, her voice sharper than intended. "He was more seriously wounded, multiple gunshot wounds." The fort surgeon wasn't optimistic. The colonel paused, compassion in his eyes. "However, I've just received a telegram. He's regained consciousness and is expected to recover, though it will take time." Eleanor pressed a hand to her mouth, containing a sob of relief. "Thank God," she whispered. "He must be quite remarkable," Hargrove observed. "The surgeon said he's never seen anyone survive injuries that severe through sheer stubbornness." A smile touched Eleanor's lip. "And that sounds like him?" The colonel rose, tucking the portfolio under his arm. "I should go, Tomorrow will be busy once the arrests begin. Harrington has many allies who will be implicated as well. Eleanor escorted him to the door. Thank you, Colonel, for everything. After he left, she returned to the window, but her mind was far from the foggy streets of San Francisco. It was in a dusty military hospital, with a scarred hunter fighting his way back to her. Stubborn man, she murmured fondly to the empty room. A month later, Eleanor stood on the platform of the San Francisco train station, scanning the disembarking passengers anxiously. The afternoon sun gleamed on her dark blue traveling suit. She had exchanged morning black for navy, a concession to propriety while acknowledging that life must continue. Hayes Shipping was once again secure under her leadership, with her father's most trusted captains and managers rallying to support her. Harrington and his conspirators had been arrested in a series of dawn raids that made headlines across the country. The scandal had rocked political and business circles, but Eleanor had weathered it with the quiet dignity her father would have expected. The last passengers were descending from the train when she saw him. He moved more slowly than before, favoring his left side where the worst of his wounds had been. His face was thinner, his clothes hanging somewhat loosely on his frame, but his eyes, when they found her in the crowd, were the same, intense, aware, alive. Nathaniel made his way toward her, each step deliberate. Beside him walked Virgil, leaning on a cane but otherwise appearing hale and hearty. Eleanor restrained herself from running to them, instead waiting with hands clasped tightly before her until they reached her position. Miss Hayes. Nathaniel greeted her formally, though his eyes conveyed much more than his words. Mr. Hawke, she replied, a smile breaking through her composure. You're looking alive, Virgil chuckled. Only because the army doctors wouldn't let him leave until he could stand without falling over. Stubborn fool wanted to travel 2 weeks ago. I had a promise to keep, Nathaniel said simply, his gaze never leaving Eleanor's face. Virgil cleared his throat. Well, I believe I see an old acquaintance over there by the baggage car. If you'll excuse me. He winked at Eleanor before limping away, giving them a moment of relative privacy amid the bustling station. For a heartbeat, they simply looked at each other, the weeks of separation and uncertainty hanging between them. Then, Eleanor stepped forward and carefully, mindful of his injuries, wrapped her arms around him. I was afraid I'd never see you again, she admitted, her voice muffled against his chest. His arms encircled her, one hand coming up to stroke her hair. It would take more than a few bullets to keep me from finding you, he murmured. I told you I would. She pulled back slightly to look up at him. I've secured rooms for you and Virgil at the hotel. The colonel made sure your injuries will be tended by the finest doctors in San Francisco. Eleanor, he began, a hint of unease in his tone. I'm not sure I belong in your world here. San Francisco is a far cry from the territories. A man like me, she pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. A man like you is exactly what I need. Brave, honorable, stubborn enough to survive impossible odds. Her expression softened. But if the city doesn't suit you, Hayes Shipping has operations throughout the West. I'm told Arizona territory is particularly promising. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You've thought this through. I've had a month to think of little else, she admitted. The company needs someone I can trust implicitly to oversee security for our more sensitive shipments. Someone who can't be bribed or intimidated. You're offering me a job? He asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Among other things, she replied boldly. But we can discuss those after you've recovered fully. A slow smile spread across his scarred face, transforming it. I look forward to those discussions, Miss Hayes. She took his arm, mindful of his injuries, and began guiding him toward the waiting carriage. I should warn you, my board of directors is already in an uproar about a woman running the company. When they learn I've hired a notorious bounty hunter as head of security, they'll adapt, he said confidently. Or they'll learn why the Blackwell gang feared my name. Eleanor laughed, a sound of genuine joy that turned heads among the passers-by. I've missed you, Nathaniel Hawke. His expression sobered as he helped her into the carriage. When I was lying in that hospital, not sure if I'd live or die, there was only one thought that kept me fighting. He settled beside her, taking her gloved hand in his. I needed to know if that kiss meant what I hoped it did. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. It meant that I found something I wasn't looking for when you cut me down from that post, something I never expected to find in this lifetime." "And what was that?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "A partner," she said simply. "Someone who sees me as I am, not as what society expects me to be. Someone who makes me stronger, braver." She squeezed his hand. "Someone worth fighting for." Virgil approached the carriage, pretending not to notice their clasped hands as he climbed in across from them. "All settled then?" he asked innocently. "Getting there," Nathaniel replied, his eyes still on Eleanor's face. As the carriage pulled away from the station, Eleanor gazed out at the city that had once been her prison of expectations and propriety. Now it represented possibility, a new chapter in a story she was writing for herself, with a most unexpected co-author at her side. The silver locket rested against her heart, no longer containing secrets, but serving as a reminder of all she had endured, all she had discovered about herself in the process. She had entered the wilderness as Thomas Hayes' sheltered daughter and emerged as her own woman, stronger, wiser, and unexpectedly in love with a scarred hunter who had risked everything to save her. Some might call it an unlikely match, the shipping heiress and the bounty hunter with the troubled past, but Eleanor knew better. They were perfectly matched, two souls who had found each other against impossible odds, who had fought side by side against darkness and emerged victorious. As San Francisco opened before them, Nathaniel's hand remained firmly in hers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges they would face together. But of one thing, Eleanor was absolutely certain. She was no longer tied to a post in Bandit territory, waiting for rescue. She had become the author of her own fate, with a man beside her who would never seek to bind her, only to walk the trail alongside her, wherever it might lead. And that, she decided as she met Nathaniel's gaze with a smile that promised everything, was the greatest freedom of all.